This call is being recorded.
Welcome to a winning cup, you guys. Today with me, I have Conrad, and I'm going to let Conrad take it away and share his story. Then I'll say how we met, because how we met is absolutely amazing. But I'm going to let Conrad take it away first, and then I'll interject how we met.
Sure. Well, Win, thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to share my story. I'm typically on the other end of the microphone and listening to other people's stories because I'm a podcast host and I'm also a documentary filmmaker. And I like to say that I tell stories that matter and I dive deep into subjects that are interesting to me. And I produce documentary films. And here a couple of years ago, I started to produce my own podcast called the My Story Podcast, where I have interesting people on who tell their story and the life lessons they've learned along the way. So I really appreciate being on your show.
Well, it's my great honor. And you guys can't see this, but I think I'm looking at one Emmy Award.
Yeah, that's one. It's a regional Emmy award and a couple of other awards that I received for some of my films. So,
Well,
mhm.
lucky duck me. Lucky duck me. I actually love the independent film industry. I actually went to school with a woman who's actually been on this podcast, Naomi McDougall Jones, and she is a pioneer in the independent film industry, and she obviously went to school with me. So she is a huge champion of women in the independent film industry. And one of the questions I asked her is, how does she feel about disabled women being in the independent film industry? She goes, I wish there was more women in general being in the film industry. So I love my independent film experts, and I love my independent film people. And how we met is via a podcasting room on Clubhouse, you guys. That's how Conrad and I met. So, and that's how Conrad and I met. And I had the lucky strike this past weekend to meet a friend of mine in person, thank you very much, who lives in um, Arizona, Phoenix. And how she and I met was on Clubhouse, and then we took it off Clubhouse to do a project together. And she and I met this past weekend, for the first time in person. And so Clubhouse, power of Clubhouse is absolutely amazing, and it's absolutely phenomenal what this iOS app could do.
It's been so much fun to connect with people on Clubhouse and being in the room. I saw you in the room this morning in the podcast
Yep.
room. So it was just fun to be there and to interact. I think that's a really fun room. We have a theme every week, or every day, but it seems to diverge quickly as we get into the conversation. So
Yeah,
it's fun to
exactly.
connect with everyone.
And so, it's amazing to me what um, what the podcast room has taught me, and what the podcast room has bought me. I mean, my podcast not only exploded in downloads just because I was on Clubhouse and sharing my story, but it's also exploded on podcast guests. Now, what has been the favorite podcast episode that you have done? You.
Well, that's a great question. I have so many interesting people on. I think one of my favorites is my friend, uh, and my brain is not working well tonight, but he is a storm chaser and he chases tornadoes. He's called a tornado hunter. He actually has a show on A&E or some other TV show network where he shows his work at following storms across the country and he's actually Canadian, so he hasn't been able to come across the border recently, but because of COVID. But over the past number of years, he's documented some of the biggest storms and most devastating tornadoes in our country. And hearing his stories and how he got involved in that industry was very interesting. And so that was a really fascinating episode for the My Story podcast.
A storm chaser. And now we get into the nitty gritty of podcasting. What has been the least favorite episode that you have done that you wish had never seen the light of day, and the interviewee was dry as toast? Let's admit it. And you're thinking, oh boy.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to say that the interview that I'm thinking of hasn't aired. And so it was an interview that I was introduced to a person, and I thought this would be a great interview. And it just ended up being a real challenge to pull the questions or the answers out of my guest. And, typically people love to talk and to share. And this was kind of a one or two sentence answer. And those are always challenging when a guest really doesn't understand the medium, I guess, to have a conversation. At least that's how I do my interviews. It's more of a
Yeah,
conversation. And
it's not
and when you don't have
like
those, when you just get
conversation.
kind of pat answers, and then you kind of have to, okay, I got to go to my next question.
Yeah,
It's really challenging.
really a challenge. And I got stuck as an interviewee in one of those pad interviews questions, and I thought, okay, when I do my own podcast, this was way back when, before I even thought about doing my own podcast. Um, I thought, when I do my own podcast or when I do my own YouTube thing, I'm not going to be the one that is the padded interviewer. I'm going, and people consider me still to this day, the coffee shop interviewer. It's like, okay, pull up a chair, sit down, and have a cup of coffee with Lynn. And people seem to like the personal updates, like the interview styles just as much. So I think when we as podcasters explain to people what's going on, we have to break the stigma about what a podcast is. That is why I make all my guests,
Mhm.
I don't care if they're big and small, listen to the podcast before they schedule, or at least schedule a call with me, or Clubhouse can do it. Clubhouse can be my call.
Mhm.
And so I feel like we have to explain what the media is so we don't get stuck. We don't get
Mhm.
pigeonholed with those padded answers, because the padded answers, the driest toast answers, I'm sorry, but that's going to drive our fan base away.
Yeah, I just in my show and like yours, I just like having a conversation because I like to get to know the my guest and just have them be themselves and not just give those answers that would typically appear on perhaps the evening news report, right?
Yeah.
We just want to have a conversation. And
And so I know you do, I know this because you've said this publicly, you're documentarian full time, and you just do the podcast as a side job. Um,
right.
and so, again, what has been your favorite docu documentary that you have done, and what has been the most challenging?
My favorite documentary was really my first documentary film, which is the one I won the Emmy Award for. And I guess it's my favorite because I did win the Emmy Award for that. So
Mhm.
it's called The Great American Wheat Harvest. And I followed farmers, harvesters who travel across America, starting in Texas, and they work their way north, up all the way up to Montana or North Dakota every summer, and they follow the wheat. and they harvest the wheat for farmers across the country. And we produced the documentary about that. I traveled with them for 2 years over the course of 2 summers and told their story. And I got to meet some of the most amazing people, hardworking Americans who, in the heart of America. I always say that, our farmers and people who, grow the food that we eat are some of the best people in the world, some of the smartest people in the world for sure. And I really enjoyed spending time with them and getting to know them. And it was just a really fun story to tell. And then
So that would have been your first, um, into your first interview, your first documentary.
my first feature length documentary. I produced a couple of short films before that, and I did, corporate work. I did, video work for companies and organizations to help tell their story in their marketing or website videos. But this was my first like feature length documentary that actually played in theaters, and it's still available on Amazon. And people are watching it every day. I get downloads on Amazon, so it's still fun to see people find it. And that was, I think that came out 6 years ago. And so it's still fun to see that it's still selling and still being seen by people around the world.
And as I said, what has been the driest, t- the dry as toast documentary on the end?
Yeah, I can't really say that I have anyone as dry as toast, but I have one that's called Thirsty Land. And this was a challenging one. It's a story about the drought in the American West. And so it is dry, no pun intended.
Really,
Uh,
figuratively.
yeah, literally and figuratively. It does tend to be more academic. It did well in the academic circles around the country, I guess, because my primary sponsor for that film was the University of Nebraska, and their some of their organizations within the university. And so it was really a film that was well received in the academic world, and still kind of a challenge to get it out there to the rest of the world. But it is an important story of the challenges that Western states in the U.S. have dealing with water, and
Oh,
the battle between urban areas and rural areas, and agriculture areas that vie for water. So
yeah. Oh, yes. Well, now that you talked about the dry documentary, I think a lot of my fan base will go search that out because they probably, those of us who are interested in it, um, probably want to go see your work. And so, is that? Where is that documentary? If people wanted to go
Mhm.
search it and find it, where is that dry documentary?
It's on Amazon, so you can go to Amazon Prime, and if you're an Amazon Prime member, it's free, so
Yeah,
you can see it there. And it's also available through some other networks around the world. If you go to thirstylandmovie.com, you can find all the aspects of it. So
yeah.
thirstylandmovie.com is where you can find it, or just go to Amazon and search for my name. You'll find all my films there. I've got about 4 documentaries there that are on there now, and so you can check them out.
Yes, well, you're going to have to send my assistant the link because I now have Amazon Prime and I now have Netflix, you guys. So
Nice.
yes, I'm
I don't
yes.
have any films on Netflix yet, but,
No, no,
that
but
might be
I'm
coming.
now in the real world. I avoided TV for a long time. But that's another long story into why and people go, well, when you kind of have to get in the real world to not sound like a dum dum when it comes to because I like my audio content as much
Mhm.
as the rest of them. And so as much as the rest of them I like my audio content, but people are like, you have to get in the real world if you on if you want to be around people that want to understand and want to hang out with you because there's Netflix shows and Netflix movies and Amazon Prime movies that you have to watch, and I'm like, ugh, ugh. Okay, okay, I'll watch it. So yes, you got it. Now I have Audible subscription, you guys. So you
Nice.
gotta give me audiobooks, so you gotta give me well, audiobook number
Mhm.
one, but you gotta give me Netflix shows and you gotta give me Amazon Prime help because I have no clue what I'm doing. And so Conrad, if you had to shadow anyone for a week, who would for a week dead or alive, who would it be?
Well, that was a fairly easy one for me to answer. My answer would be Richard Branson. And I've been kind of a follower of Richard Branson and his rise to his notoriety, and he's an entrepreneur that really does amazing things. He does crazy things, and he just takes risks and does things, and he has just a way of working that is inspiring, and he'll take risks that everybody thinks that, oh, that's crazy. But, he's become a multi-billionaire because of that. He owns an island. So, one day I hope to own an island as well. And so I want to learn from him. I've read some of his books and I've been following him for a number of years. And so he's one that I would love to spend time with and to follow in his footsteps.
And so what's the biggest life lesson you learned during the pandemic?
Wow. I think one of the biggest life lessons is how little I really knew my neighbors. And my wife and I bought a dog this past year, and as many people did, in fact, many people in our neighborhood bought dogs. And we all would end up out on the street at night walking our dogs. And we met more of our neighbors in the past year than we have in the past 15 years. And it was like some of the neighbors that we had, I didn't even know their names. And
Yeah,
now I know their names
yeah,
and,
yeah, it's so funny because I am now, well, I shouldn't say I'm living in a s- semi-independent living situation, semi-group home, more independent living situation than group home situation, but
Mhm.
that's the way I like it. And if you guys just heard the door open as we record this on April 27th, that was my assistant walking out the door, by the way. But I am coming to find out that I got to know more of my neighbors in the past month than I ever did in Aspen, Colorado. And
Mhm.
it's funny because um, where I was in Aspen, Colorado, it was at the end of a dead end street. It wasn't really in a community that I could get outside, in a community that I can function in because of the ice and the snow. But I have learned about all about my next door neighbors living in a disabled home setting, even though I own my own home, it's still a disabled home setting. If you guys want to Google Luna Azul and Conrad, I might need to talk to you offline about um,
Mhm.
something because idea just pops in my head that
Mhm.
we can work together on something on behalf of Luna Azul because I think this would be a cool
I would
stitch.
love to. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, for you to do. See, we're cooking something up here on the podcast, you
I
guys.
like it. I love
I
it.
I just have to clarify it with powers that be, which I will.
Mm.
And so, but I would like, and when Conrad and I can make the announcement, I would love to get Conrad in some sort of a documentary on Lunazil because Lunazil is just giving you a brief summary of where I am. Lunazil is one of the first in the country that has this model of independent living for the disabled, but with support. So
Mm.
it's a hybrid, I've decided, between a strictly a group home and independent living. I mean, we have help, but yet we don't have help.
Mm,
So I and they have said we need more marketing. So I'm thinking
mm,
you and myself, and we can work together. But it's a really cool aspect.
mm,
And as I said, I have learned more about my neighbors
yeah,
in the last month than I ever thought I would.
mm,
And so a dog can do it, getting outside, meeting the neighbors
mhm,
can do it. I mean, I when I moved in there, I had my teeth coming down and look at it for me, and because I was stuck in Aspen due to I didn't get a vaccine yet, and so I was stuck in Aspen. So they did due diligence, and I said to one of my team members, and of course she loves the question I because that it was. As I said, how close are my neighbors to say to my neighbors, okay, if you need a bag of sugar or if you need my help, I'll be able to help you. And she, of course, my team member loves that question
mhm,
because she, um, I thought she would think I was nuts, but she apparently loved that question because getting to know your neighbors and getting to know your neighbors on the first name basis, Johnny, Susie, whoever it
mhm.
is a cool thing. So that's what it taught you in lockdown. I'm amazed by that.
Yeah. And I found that, I have a responsibility to the people around me. I can't necessarily change the world, but I can impact the person that lives next door. I can impact the person who perhaps, needs something. They need that pound of sugar for whatever they're working on. I can impact their life in a small way.
Yeah,
And even if I can't impact the world and change the world, I can make a change right here in my neighborhood.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I had our next door neighbors aid. We all have AIDS, of course,
Mhm.
because we're all disabled. But I had a next door neighbor ask me the other day for an extension cord, and I happened to have one. And she goes, "Hey, Lynn, do you happen to have an extension cord?" And I said, "Sure." So I got them and grabbed it. But if we can impact one neighbor,
Mhm.
and maybe we can turn their day around. We don't know if we could impact one person.
Mhm.
Well, my job is done. I mean,
Right.
I have made more friends in the past month. I know what to do with, and one of the people has said, if you don't coming down to have lunch with me, I swear I wouldn't be getting out of my office. So, yeah, that is what a neighborhood community is like.
Absolutely.
And so, as long as we can impact the world on a good thing, we are happy as clams.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's just it. All it takes is, for me to impact one person, and maybe that inspires that person to impact another person, and we can just spread the love that way. And I think that's what we need more of.
We need that. We need the and we need more love in now. Back in March, we were all so concerned about COVID. But now that people are getting vaccinated and now that people are starting to move again, we need more love and acceptance and less about, oh, you got COVID, so I won't talk to
Mhm.
you for a week because you're in quarantine. We need more neighbors, literally and figuratively, to check on the sick, to check on the disabled, to check on um, the caretakers who's taking care of the disabled, to
Mhm.
go feed the neighbor's dog,
Mhm.
to go pick up the neighbor's package, to go bring the package to the neighbor. And it's like we need more love and acceptance.
Absolutely. I think that is so important. And I think you really hit the nail on the head where caretakers are sometimes the least recognized in our world. I have a cousin who had a daughter that needed 24/7 care, And it really, it really was a challenge for the family to take care of her. And she was a beautiful young woman who, unfortunately, a few years passed away. But, I really felt for my cousin who, this was their life. They didn't expect to have a daughter who had, cerebral palsy and had all these really, really, really intense. She was not very responsive in her disease. Or I'm sorry if I don't know exactly what to call that, but she, just needed lots and lots of care. But had a beautiful personality and just had a smile that would light up the room, and it was just so much fun to be around her, to see her, and but yet my cousin, this was her life as she invested into her daughter for so many years, and just taking care of the caretaker, I think, is sometimes so important.
Oh, yes. You took the words right out of my mouth and almost made me cry.
Mm,
Taking care of the caretaker is so important, and I try my hardest to take care of those
mm,
who take care of me, whether it's a small thing. And I have had people literally say to me, "When you have taught me a lot," and when push comes to shove, I eventually, you guys, you will meet guardian angels on my team
mm,
that don't want to come out of the woodwork now, but they're slowly coming out of the woodwork. But I feel that the caretakers who support the disabled are as equally as important as the disabled. I mean, if we're not taking care of the caretakers, then the disabled can't be taken care of. And it's like, that doesn't help. And
mm.
as they say, it takes a village to raise a child, but I've decided it takes a village to raise a men. And um, and unfortunately, some of the village members have passed away. My mom and dad my biological parents have passed away. One of them in 2019,
Mm,
and the other one in 2010. And I just feel like it it took a village to raise me, but now I'm grateful for the people. I'm even more grateful for the people in my life that or behind the scenes or come out of the woodwork to help me, because I know I have been on the other end of caregiving. For those of you that don't know, I actually had the, let's say, blessing at this point to see what it was like to be a caregiver for 9 days.
mm,
9 days. And actually longer than that, because my dad came home in, actually, I was a caregiver for my mom and my dad. My mom in a different sense, but I was more caregiver for my dad. And he came home with oxygen, and he lived at home for 9 days. But my stepmom would go to work, and of course, I had help myself. So not only was the help trying to help me, she was also trying to help him. I My stepmom thought I was crazy. I stayed home the first week because I didn't know what was going on. I canceled all my appointments because um, we had a big giant chair that my dad used to sit in at our bar. And I was afraid that chair would go over. And I was capable enough to use a phone. So I canceled all when there was a sneaking suspicion, and of course I knew he had lung cancer the whole entire time. But when I figured it was either going to be a heart attack or lung cancer, and I knew because I knew this man backwards, forwards, upside down. So I canceled my and he still wanted to take me to his appointment. Finally, at the end of the week, a doctor calls him and he goes, "Doctor, I can't please." And so he drove himself to the emergency room. But I was ready with my phone to call 911
Hmm.
because I was it scared the living daylights out of me that he wanted to not only be functioning for me, but I knew he had lung cancer the whole time, and turns out that it was stage 4. So I kept him at bay that first week, and then I ended up being his, my stepmom, my stepsister, and a little bit of my help landed up keeping him alive for 9 days while they figured out what to do, what the next step was. And so I know how difficult it is to be a caregiver, and now I'm grateful for my own caregivers because I'm like, okay, I got to walk in the shoes of a caregiver for, and even if it was 9 days, but I got to walk in the shoes of a caregiver. And as my dad used to say, until you walk in someone else's shoes, you don't know.
Hmm. I think that's why I'm working on my new film project, which is called PTSD 911. And it's a story of first responders who are caregivers. So, firefighters and emergency medical technicians and police officers and even dispatchers who provide care for our communities. And so we're telling the story of those who serve our communities who are suffering from post traumatic stress. And that's my current project that I'm working on. We're kind of eyeball deep into it now, and interviewing amazing caregivers that really don't get the recognition they need. And they're really suffering from a lot of the traumas that they've experienced over the years, and so we get to tell that story.
No, and um, okay, as you guys know, I've also been emotionally and physically abused, and my witness, two, 3 of my witnesses, I had 3 witnesses in total, and one of them was my aide, and she got shaken to a car by that,
Mm.
um, and she got shaken to her core by that, by watching the person that she took care of. I know she got shaken to her core because I still talk to her, and she will say, "I will never forget the day when they came in and did what they did," and we still talk about it. But it's interesting what what a lot of people don't know about me is that I can see things without saying things.
Mm.
So dumb abuser didn't realize that I was in the education space before I became a solo entrepreneur, before my dad died. And I grew up as a solo entrepreneur's daughter, but I the dumb that she was thought, okay, we'll abuse when I I knew, okay, the next thing is after you get abused, you report it. And so that's the next thing I did. And it's like, okay, they didn't know that I had the training as a first responder or as a first reporter to report them. And it's like, okay, dumb. You you think you're gonna get to abuse me just because I have cerebral palsy? No, I had 3 witnesses. One One witness was in the shower, and I won't forgive her for that. The other witness was in the middle of my house. The other witness was 10 feet away from me, and
Mhm.
they couldn't do anything. They could not do anything because they abuser won't let the abusee go to get help. So even if I contacted the witness who was 10 feet away from me, the abuser would have had a hissy fit. And over the years of dealing with this, I've learned that. But at the same time, you don't abuse a disabled person without someone noticing. And that's why caregivers keep a eagle eye hawk, keep eagle eyes on me and eagle eyes on those who they take care of. No wonder why these caregivers have PTSD. No wonder why, because the first responders and the cops and everything else, have seen it all.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really challenging to see and to hear these stories that we're telling, about so many first responders. There's very few first responders that have not been impacted by the traumas that they've seen. And so but there's amazing people that are helping them. There's, again, more helpers helping the helpers. And,
Yeah,
and which
it-
is great to see that.
it's like the helpers need the helpers.
Right.
It's like, no, we can help win, but we need to help ourselves.
Sure.
And yeah, I have a friend that goes that when I asked her a couple weeks ago, I said, "How are you?" She was shocked. She's been blown away. She goes, "Lynn, I'm okay, but no one really ever asked me that." And I'm like, "They don't. They don't because um, of her line of work, and I won't get into her line of work, but they don't ask her that because of her line of work. Me, I ask her that. That's my MO. My
Mm.
MO was always at 6 years old. The story goes that I would ask adults how they were, and adults would turn around like, "What?" And I've said to a couple of these parents in this community, "You're doing an amazing job," as they're walking around with us, with the family member who can't speak, who's um, pacing up and down the hallway. And so, and it's taking them a couple minutes to realize I love what I do, even though it drives me nuts sometimes.
Mhm.
But it took this person who I said that to a couple minutes to realize, hey, I just received a compliment. And then she turned around and said, that really made my day, and thank you. And
Mhm.
so the helpers need to help the helpers. And so the more we can share their stories, the better. And more that you and all the independent filmmakers come out of the woodwork and talk to people like me and talk to independent podcasters in general, the better.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to tell these stories because there are so many great stories to tell, and I feel privileged to be able to do that through the films that I produce, through the podcasts that I have, and I just feel that it's my duty and it's kind of my purpose and my passion to tell these stories that matter, and so it's always a privilege to, and for me especially when someone is telling perhaps their trauma story where they're revealing things about their life that's very personal, and I feel privileged to kind of sit in the room with them and to hear them tell that story. And it's really this last week I interviewed a woman who told me her very personal story of she was a paramedic for 30 years, and the traumas that she experienced through that job, really impacted her. Then she went through a very traumatic divorce, and because her husband was a first responder as well, and they just, could not, figure things out, and it was a very traumatic thing. And I felt just really privileged that she was willing to share that with me. Yeah.
I I do also as an independent podcaster. I mean, stuff that people have told me on and off mic is unbelievable, and stuff that my aides have told me behind the scenes is quite frankly unbelievable. And the more and more people get to know me, the true, true authentic win they will see. And people are like, when since moving to Phoenix, Arizona, you've had a personality change. You are a much brighter, happier person. And I said, well, this is the personality that I've always had, giggling a thousand miles a minute. And this is the personality that I've always had. I went into my shell in 2019 and 2020, obviously, because of COVID and because of lockdown. But I've said to people, now this is not true anymore since I've been down there, but I said to people, my biggest wish is to see people again and hug people again and say, hi, how are you? And that was so difficult for me because I'm an extrovert, as you will know. And so this extrovert had to slow the roll a little bit, but I was patient, and then I got impatient, and then I got repatient again because I was moving. But I think during the lockdown, it taught us how valuable true friendship was, and how the careers and media industry are valuable. We don't end up going to waste.
Right, absolutely. And that's I'm privileged because during the lockdowns I didn't have to change a lot of things because I work from my home anyway. My wife had to change some things because she's a school administrator, so things were very challenging for her and what she was doing. But for me, I kind of kept on doing what I was doing, and yeah, I was able to spend that year in lockdown just building the community around my new film project, and so that was really a blessing for me, and really work on improving my podcast and researching guests and bringing guests on, and so yeah, I feel that the pandemic, as terrible as it has been, and as many people that have, and I've lost many friends that I know that have, that are no longer with us, and that's very sad. But I think overall, it's been for me personally been an amazing experience to grow personally and to really grow more focused in who I am and what I'm doing and my calling. And
Yeah.
so that's what it's done for me.
I I definitely agree. Now, as we wrap this interview up, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a travel buff. I love to travel. If you could go anywhere in the world, all expenses paid, where would you go?
Oh my goodness, you guys don't know this, but I've been invited to Brazil. I've also been invited um, over this past month. I've also been invited to Celluloses Mexico, which I am taking up eventually,
Mm,
and I am going to do both eventually. And my bucket list is Bali. Bali, I don't know anyone, so that's gonna be a little bit of a trick. But
mm,
Celluloses Mexico, I do know someone who's invited me down, and we'll figure it out. Um, Brazil, I have a friend who's Brazilian who will give me free housing if I ask her nicely.
mm,
And so, also in Cellulose, Mexico, I can get free minimal housing too. And so, those three, Brazil and Cellulose, Mexico, or anywhere in Mexico, quite frankly, would and Bali would be my choices to travel.
mm. Yeah, that's I always like to explore those things of where, if the world were just in front of us and we could do anything, this is what I would, I always like to ask those questions. So yeah, so I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's been so much
No, well,
pleasure to
you're
talk to
welcome.
you.
And so, how can people support you? Because I know from my experience working with independent filmmakers that it's a little bit tricky financially. So, how can people support you other than downloading and other than liking pages
Mhm.
and other than liking your work and supporting you on Clubhouse and supporting me on Clubhouse? How can people support you? And obviously, they can leave a review on Apple Podcast for Conrad's podcast. That
Sure.
helps too. But I want to know how people can support you and what you would like the uh, a winning cup team to do to support you.
Well, right now we're in the middle of fundraising for my PTSD film, and if you go to PTSD 911 movie, all one word, PTSD911movie.com, and you can see our film trailer on there. You can see all the ways that you can support us. You can sign up for our emails. I got, we have some special things going on with the emails right now. If you sign up for our weekly emails, and if you consider, if you like the project and want to support it financially, there's a big button there that says support this film. You can make a donation, get your name in the credits of a film, and you can help us do that. Otherwise, go to my podcast. It's called the My Story Podcast, and you can find it on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. And go there and take a listen. And if you like what you hear, give me a rating and leave a review. I'd love it.
And also, you guys, if you like what you hear to please leave me a review and please do all that, all those reviews. And I believe on Amazon Prime, I gotta check this now that I have Amazon Prime, but I believe you can leave a review on a film if you like it. And I know on Amazon in general you could leave a review, but I I really think that reviews help. Reviews of the movies and testimonials help for other people to see these incredible films. I mean, we're not talking about big Netflix films yet, but we're talking about small independent films and support the little guys, please.
Absolutely. Those reviews are really vital for, one review will inspire the person to actually watch the film,
Yeah,
take a listen.
exactly.
So that's really important. And so for everyone who leaves a review, I'm very deeply grateful for those reviews.
Exactly. And you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed another episode. I'm so sorry. I have been a little bit off the plan. You guys know why I've been a little bit off the plan, and I'm still in the middle of being off the planet. Even though I'm back on the planet, I'm still in the middle of being on the planet. I won't be on the planet completely until I would say June, because I am still dealing with my transition of a move. And so I am sorry, you guys, if you thought, well, where's Win? Win is still on the planet, but she's hiding. And so to get a hold of me now, it's a little bit of a trick and a half, but I will be completely back on the planet and completely back to work in June. And I hope that this podcast episode inspired you to support the little guys and support independent filmmakers. And we'll just see what happens.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
you
Win.
guys. Bye, you guys.